wanted to do a deep dive on that for a few minutes with Mark Potok. He's with the Southern Poverty Law Center, splcenter.org. Mark, welcome back to the program.
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Remind me again of your title. I'm sorry, I don't have the internet, so I don't have my one sheet with all the information on it.
Sure. I have two titles. I'm a senior fellow at the Southern Poverty Law Center and also editor-in-chief of our investigative magazine, The Intelligence Report.
Great. Thank you so much. And I understand that this fellow, Gavin Eugene Long, the fellow who murdered the 3 police officers in Baton Rouge, actually filed documents last year in Missouri claiming that he was a sovereign citizen, a member of the United Washita, a bunch of words I can't even pronounce, Nation Midwest Washita Tribes, that this is the Moorish sovereign citizen movement. Can you tell me what this, A, is there accuracy to that report, and B, if so, what does it mean?
I mean, it's a long, complicated thing to explain. You know, basically the sovereign citizen movement was formed back in the late 70s, early 80s by a violently anti-Semitic and anti-Black group called the Posse Comitatus. And it started all of these ideas that the federal government essentially has no authority, that you can't be required if you're a sovereign citizen. Sometimes they think you have to declare your sovereignty. You can't be required to pay taxes, or you don't need a driver's license. You don't have to settle your credit card debt. You can prevent the banks from foreclosing on you. All fantasies, but all connected to this idea that the federal government has been usurped by evil people and so on.
Very appealing fantasies to somebody who's down on their luck and perhaps a little mentally ill.
That's right, and that's why we've seen the sovereign citizen movement grow so wildly since 2008, and that, of course, was two things, both the big recession and the election of Barack Obama. I mean, those two things really gave rise to kind of the second wave of the militia movement, the patriot movement that we're seeing now, and sovereign citizens are a subset of that. But what's odd about it is that the original sovereign ideology held that, quote-unquote, 14th Amendment citizens, which is to say Black people in America, could not be sovereigns because by accepting citizenship at the hands of the federal government as a kind of gift from the federal government, they become obliged to the feds and have to be slaves of the government, not like other people. So it was a fundamentally anti-Black racist ideology. But that has been forgotten. We saw the first Black sovereign citizens in the 1990s during the first wave of the militia movement, and we've seen an enormous number of Black sovereign citizens, so-called, since the election of Obama. You know, Washita Nation is a strange group, and most of the sovereign citizens are not organized into groups, but this is a strange group that mixes sovereign ideas with some old Black nationalist ideas about being Moors, about Black people being the original inhabitants of the United States. Basically, the Washita Nation was run by this woman. She called herself the Empress, Verdiachi Gossip. She had a huge, long title. Besides that, she died a couple of years ago in 2014. But the claim was that the Louisiana Purchase was never legally consummated, and it actually belongs to the descendants of the people who dug the mounds. That's the word you were trying to pronounce. They called themselves the Washita Dead Dug da Moundia, but what it's really taken from is the mound builders. So they think they're the descendants of the original inhabitants of North America, and that they personally, and actually the person of the Empress, owns the lands of the Louisiana Purchase. They claim they own something like 30 million acres of land. You know, there's no association in the past, at least, between the Washita and criminal violence or terrorist violence, but there is an association with various kinds of financial frauds and the kinds of things you see more typically in the broader sovereign citizens movement.
Right. So first of all, how seriously do you think that this fellow who killed these 3 police officers in Baton Rouge was motivated by his affiliation with Sovereign Citizen versus other kinds of motivation? You know, he's an African-American himself, outraged over police violence against Black people, that sort of thing. what evidence have you seen that his motivation might be more hostility against the government, or both? Actually, is the perfect confluence.
It seems, we don't know that awful much about him so far, but from reading a lot of what he's done online, YouTube postings and so on, he declares these things. He's a sovereign and so on. But the reality is, of course, he says, he filed these documents saying he's a member of the Washington Nation, but he also says in the same breath that he's a former member of the Nation of Islam, which is very different ideology. It's also black nationalist, but it's explicitly Muslim, or at least some form of Muslim, a sort of bizarre offshoot of Islam. Mm-hmm. So, what I would say, again, based on not too much information, is it looks like this was a guy who was kind of ideology shopping and had been looking at all kinds of strains of black nationalism. Clearly he was interested in that, in a form of black nationalism. Clearly he was angry at cops, and who's to say, how much of that was, obviously there's been a lot happening, and there is a lot of real anger at police based on real events. So, to separate that from, the strange ideologies this guy was at least flirting with is difficult.
Yeah. Do sovereign citizens have are they perceived by law enforcement as a threat? I've read that they're considered the most dangerous of all the terrorist groups in the United States, including, Al-Qaeda and ISIS people.
Well, one could argue about that. I think that's probably going a little far. But the fact is that in 2011, the FBI did officially describe the sovereign citizens movement as a, quote, domestic terrorist movement. Now, that said, the vast majority of people who call themselves sovereign citizens don't murder cops, don't hold up banks, don't even rip off mortgage companies or that kind of thing. Right. However, at least 7 police officers or law enforcement officials have been murdered by sovereigns in the last 12, 13 years. What happened in a number of those cases were sovereigns who don't believe that they should have to carry driver's license or put tags on their car or insure their vehicles, get into confrontations with police officers who pull them over on the road. So that's been a number of the cases we've seen. So there really is quite a lot. And the sovereign movement, almost by definition, engages in illegal acts like creating false property liens that are filed against its enemies, false cashier's checks or bank checks that they use to rip off banks and other institutions. Washington Nation in particular was well known and got into trouble was prosecuted for selling fake driver's licenses, fake car registrations, creating fake tags for people's cars and that kind of thing.
Right. Remarkable stuff. Mark Potok, Senior Fellow of the Southern Poverty Law Center, Editor-in-Chief of SPLC's Intelligence Report and its investigative reports. SPLcenter.org is the website. You can tweet it at SPL Center as well. Mark, thank you.
Thank you. A pleasure.
Very good talking to you. We'll be right back.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.